Thanks for having us today. I'm Michael Crandell. I'm the CEO of RightScale. We're a cloud management company, so we focus on managing 9 different public and private cloud platforms, including cost analytics, so you can analyze what you're spending and charge it back, and self-service module that allows enterprise IT to deliver on to business end users.
Hi, I'm Steve Brodie. I'm the CEO of Electric Cloud. We provide a DevOps automation platform. And what we do is we automate and we accelerate the whole software delivery process after the developer checks in the code. So after the developer checks in the code, automating the builds, automating the tests, automating all the infrastructure provisioning and application deployment. And our focus is really on very large organizations who are trying to do DevOps at scale. So large organizations like Samsung, SpaceX, GM, Qualcomm, organizations like that.
Hi, I'm John Gifford. I'm the founder and Chief Search Officer at Loggly. We are logging as a service, so we're a centralized log management, analytics, and search platform for essentially any machine data you want to send us. So obviously the typical things would be application logs, server logs, system logs, stuff like that. But you can also log out of the browser. So it's really just a way of making it really easy for you to know what's going on in your production or QA or test environments.
Very good. Okay, so the question I promised the audience, what is your definition of DevOps? Who wants to go? Well, Steve, you mentioned DevOps, so why don't you get started?
You know, I think DevOps, there is a lot of mystery around it. I kind of describe it as akin to cloud circa 2007, when it was a very nascent market. But I think fundamentally it is about communication, collaboration, and breaking down organizational silos with the intended business goal of delivering better software faster. And so in many organizations, you've had this historical silos where you've had dev, you've had QA, you've had IT, and it's created a lot of bottlenecks in the delivery process. And if you look at Agile, it focused for many years on really what was going on in the development team, and it got mired down in religious wars of, do I program in pairs? Do I meet standing up? Do I meet sitting down? And there was all these impediments downstream. And I think that's really what it's about, is breaking down some of those barriers between the groups, identifying shared processes that span those organizations, and also defining shared objectives. As many people know, in the past, development has been encouraged to deliver more software, and IT has really been measured on uptime and SLAs, which kind of gives you a tendency towards resistance to change. And that just really won't fly in this day and age where you have to compete based on software innovation, and you have to deliver software innovation faster. So it's really fundamentally about breaking down those barriers. And we can talk about the tools, but the fundamental impediments are really organizational, cultural, in my opinion.
I would add that I think that's a great definition. One thing that DevOps is not, I heard one of our customers once say, we were using BroOps. BroOps is, bro, I got Debian running on these servers over here, and it's working fine so far. DevOps, I would define, the key elements to me are automation, from developing software through testing, through deployment to production, and maintenance of the production system. And it's around automation, and that keys off of standardization. So it doesn't work if you're using sort of different models, different builds, different configurations at each stage. You need to think through the whole process and standardize what you're using.
And I would agree with all of that, particularly the automation part and the fact that you don't want to make any kind of artificial distinctions between development, testing, QA, production. You want all of that to be as similar as it can possibly be. The other thing is, I think that it kind of from a personal point of view, it takes advantage of the fact that good developers tend to want to know what's going on in production, and good sysadmins tend to want to know a little bit more about, what the code is. So I think, it leverages the fact that you have smart people working in sort of potentially different silos, but they have a vested interest in knowing what each other is doing. And so the fact that you can leverage that is a good thing for DevOps, I think.
So one of the key aspects of DevOps is continuous development, continuous deployment, continuous integration, and all of those leverage automation capabilities. But as Steve said, it's breaking down organizational silos as well. So we have these two sides of DevOps. It's about the tools, it's about automation, or it's about breaking down organizational silos, it's about the people. So which is it? Is it about the people, or is it about the technology? Or if it's both, how are they supposed to work together differently than we've always put them together?
Well, I think it's essentially about the technology, but obviously if people don't want to adopt the technology, if they don't think that way from beginning through end, it's not going to work. So clearly it implies that there needs to be a psychological shift or a mental shift toward thinking through that entire process and which pieces along the chain you or a particular group occupies, and then working with the others there too.
I think you have to do DevOps, fundamentally what you want to do is you want to automate as many things as you can. You want to automate the manual, tedious, repetitive processes so humans can focus on what they do best. I think the danger, if you don't step back and address some of the organizational issues, the shared objectives, is you can get automation still within the silos. So you may still have your ops team saying, I'm using Chef and Puppet and we're doing DevOps, but still you've got these bottlenecks in terms of the downstream process. So I think fundamentally you have to look at it holistically, look at the end-to-end process, and it really becomes a matter of continuous process improvement. If you kind of look at sort of the lean manufacturing approaches, if I'm trying to get throughput through the system, where are some of those bottlenecks? And I can't automate just in my silo. I can't do infrastructure configuration management if my biggest bottlenecks are upstream in the build area or in the test area or in the environment provisioning area.
Yeah, and I would just echo that it's got to be, people have got to buy into it for it to work. You can't automate something and then not have people use it. And you can't also have people who desperately want to automate but can't. So it's definitely a balance.
Right, so it was started off with breaking down organizational silos, which is a people question, talking about automation, focusing on a technology question, but then you brought up process as well. So we have the big three, people, process, and technology. But traditionally, we've always focused on those three things in enterprises, or in IT in particular. But now we're slicing them the other way, right? Instead of saying, okay, here's the people side, here's the technology, here's the process, we're saying, well, we really have to put them together and automate. The automation drives velocity across the entire organization. So that brings up the question: is this really all about IT? Is it all about software? It's development operations gave it its name, but it's really driving toward business at velocity. So what does the business need to know? The business stakeholders need to know. What does the CEO need to know about DevOps?
I would say that one of the things that is joined at the hip with DevOps is agile development. And in fact, if you adopt an agile development methodology, and what we've seen internally at RightScale, but also with our customers, is those who are pursuing agile development, it marries very well and it almost requires a DevOps kind of mentality. If you're releasing to production every week or even more frequently, it pushes you into this mode where you need to automate more, you need to think through the whole process, and you get used to it happening at a cadence that brings all of that together.
Yeah, I think if you look at it from the CEO's perspective, I think what you said there before about DevOps really being an evolution and an extension of Agile, it really is that evolution. And if you come back and you look at the Agile Manifesto, it was really about delivering working software much more frequently, being much more responsive. So in many organizations, Agile has risen to the top and there's Agile initiatives. I think DevOps really is an extension of that. But I think fundamentally for a CEO to look at it, I think it comes back to what Mark Andreessen said, that software is eating the world. Software is really the driver of innovation across nearly every industry. I mean, you look at Uber and what it's doing to the taxi industry. You look at Netflix and what it did to Blockbuster. You look at Amazon and what it does to online retailers. All of these companies are getting disrupted by technology and software. So from a CEO's perspective, if software really is the driver of innovation, I have to be able to deliver that software-powered innovation faster. It's going to enable new business models for me, allow me to achieve some of my business objectives. And fundamentally what DevOps is about is delivering better software faster. So it's one of the tools in the toolkit to advance that business agenda and become a little bit more competitive. And if you want to understand how serious it is, there was an Innosight study in 2012 that looked at the tenure on the S&P 500. If you go back to the 50s, the tenure on the S&P 500 was about 60 years. If you look in the 1980s, the tenure on the S&P 500 was 25 years. It's now down to 18 years, and it's projected to get even faster. By 2030, 75% of the companies on the S&P 500 are going to get disrupted. And it's all going to be by these new incumbents that are coming in and being able to compete more with software-powered innovation. And so that's why it's critically important for the CEO and other business leaders to understand DevOps.
And I think the other key factor here is that it's an accelerant, meaning because you have to have this mindset of continuous improvement, continuous process checking, and sort of validating that the process is working and cycling on that, making sure that you're always kind of improving. Hopefully the side effect of that is that spreads throughout the organization, and you end up with a lot more collaboration. I don't want to say that DevOps applies to every part of a company and that you should destroy all the barriers, but I think that the mindset of, particularly with automation, where you're going to be running automated processes to build, deploy, manage your production systems, those processes are also in a continuous sort of improvement cycle. So it's not just that you sort of take up DevOps and you get a 50% improvement or whatever the number is. It's that it puts you on a path to continue that at an ongoing rate rather than just a step function.
Yeah, I think if anything, the three of you aren't really going quite far enough. I mean, Steve, you sort of put your finger on one of the key challenges, and that is that today's enterprises are software-driven organizations. What we've seen over many decades is this odd notion that business and IT are separate, have different ways of communicating and different priorities, and there's always some sort of adversarial relationship between the two. When in reality, IT has always been part of the business, only now we're raising the stakes on that. We're saying we can't have business unless software rises to the challenge, because we're betting the farm on software giving us the agility and velocity we need to be competitive. Because if we're not doing it, our competition is, and we're going to be left in the dust, whether we're a bank, insurance company, manufacturer, any traditional enterprise. So this is actually changing the perspective on the role that IT, that software development plays in the organization. It's now becoming the primary priority for the business, right? It's not about the software geeks doing their work in some room somewhere. It's about connecting to the business in a way that is focusing better on how businesses have to leverage technology. And we can't deal with having the two separate. So I guess that sort of needs the other question. Is like, what do people need to do? If people in the room want to do DevOps, what do they need to do? That is, what are the skills that they need? What are the capabilities that they need in order to get this right?
Let's mix it up and throw it over there.
Let John go first.
You want to start?
I think you need to identify what it is that you want to achieve from it. So I think, like I said earlier, I think good engineers on both sides of the ops dev continuum care about the other side, and I think you need to find the people that really do care about it and get them to drive it. I think that if you don't do that, you're gonna struggle to get people to appreciate why you should be doing it. I think that we've talked a lot about automation. We haven't mentioned virtualization. I think that's also one of the key things that's happening here, which is that 10 years ago, I couldn't run a virtual server that kind of mimicked what production was on my desktop. Now I can. So there's no excuse to run, to develop in Windows and test in Windows and then, do QA on Ubuntu and then deploy on CentOS. You can just have CentOS, Ubuntu, or Windows everywhere and the same environment to do that. So I think you need to think hard about what are the disconnects between each of the stages of the development, all the development through to production pipeline, and just attack those and make them go away, because you can make them go away. It's just a matter of making a few key decisions and then saying, okay, we are going to use the production, and this is what we do, we're going to use the production automation scripts to build our developer playgrounds in our QA environment and our test environment. And once you've done that, then you know that's a big step towards getting where you need to be.
So coming back to the question of what are the skill sets that you need to be successful, I mean, we can talk a little bit about the approaches you can take, but if you look at the skill sets, I think it varies a little bit by individuals within the organization. Again, I come back to fundamentally, it is about communication and collaboration, breaking down those silos. So I think if you have an application or a team that wants to adopt DevOps, having that communication, having that collaboration, having that shared objective is very important. And if you're going to make this kind of change, it is important to have executive leadership and someone that is very skilled in organizational change management and can really say that this is a burning bridge issue for us. We have to adapt. We have to become better at delivering software faster and have to be able to overcome some of those objections and overcome some of that resistance. So that's at the executive level. You know, I think if you look at the architectures, to actually deliver faster, if you look in a legacy environment, if you're a large enterprise, you find that a lot of your applications aren't really architected to update parts of it very quickly because it's very intertwined. And so the ability to look at the architecture and move much more to microservice, based architectures and approaches allows you to change pieces of the system, pieces of the application or features without breaking anything else. When you get down to the tools and the automation, I mean, if you really look at it, it has changed pretty dramatically. A much greater importance on automated testing. If you look in the past, it was much more manual testing. In the DevOps world, it's much more around automated testing and people that can create these automated tests. If you look on the operations side, the infrastructure provisioning, cloud enablement, cloud provisioning, and model-based configuration management, things like Puppet and Chef, et cetera. And also your continuous delivery automation. So there's a whole new set of tools that you have to understand. But really, you have to have all of these pieces, the communication, collaboration, the technology skill sets, the architectural skill sets, and then that leadership, that change leadership at the top.
I'm going to give you a simple recipe for starting out with DevOps. Pick a bite-sized project, get somebody who wants to learn or who already knows continuous integration, who can push stuff through to a staging system, use the cloud, and then pay enough attention so that when you push that project to production, you've given some thought to how to handle errors, outages, and basically rollbacks to the previous version, because inevitably you're going to push something through that didn't work quite right. It's normal, it happens, so have a rollback strategy.
Yeah, I would say that there are a range of technical skills that you need, but really the fundamental skills that are most important to being successful at DevOps are the soft skills. So empathy is number one. Be able to work on a team where essentially your role is to understand and help everybody else be successful. That as opposed to having an adversarial or a throw it over the wall mentality, which is so common in large organizations. But also having a firm grasp as to what the business is trying to accomplish. What are your business goals? Or if you're in the public sector, what are your mission priorities? Technical people can no longer have the luxury of separating themselves from what the business is trying to accomplish. And then I would also say that, yes, you do need technical skills, but you don't want to necessarily have narrow skills. It's important to, the catchphrase today is to have full stack skills. Now, full stack doesn't necessarily mean you're a jack of all trades. Don't feel like you have to be an expert in everything, because that wouldn't necessarily serve your organization well either. I mean, they still need specializations, because a lot of these technical skills take many years to become really good. But being full stack means being able to work in a diverse team and understand the various problems so that you're technically astute enough to know when you need help and to know when you can help somebody else. So it's about being able to work better on teams within the context of what the business is trying to accomplish. Because these teams are not just all technical teams. You'll have stakeholder representation, customer representation as well. And that's a fundamental part of how you need to be, what you need to have to be successful DevOps. So in fact, I'm delivering a webinar a week from today on this very topic. So stay tuned for that. A little shameless plug. I mean, whatever. They're not paying me, so I get to stick in a plug. Okay, so somebody mentioned cloud computing, so let's tie it to the talk earlier this morning. What is the relationship between cloud computing and DevOps? There's a lot of commonalities. I mean, automation is a common theme, but is there more to it than that? So open that up.
Person to start with this one, I think, Michael.
Yeah, well, essentially it's pretty simple. The cloud is elastic infrastructure that you can get, when you want it and pay as you go. So with the basic concept of DevOps going from a smaller developer instance of an application up to one that might be in production, scaling very, very large, it's super convenient to have infrastructure on demand. And all the way through that flow from, hey, I've got a new developer, he needs some resources, or she, all the way through to massive scalability systems. Cloud is a perfect fit for that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, if you kind of come back to the model of looking at flow and saying, look, I'm trying to deliver better software faster, and you look where some of your bottlenecks traditionally have been, you go into some organizations and they say, if I want to provision some infrastructure, if I go to IT and it's a manual process, it may take me 40 days to do this. You go through a requisition process. So if you're trying to become really efficient, and every time you make a change, you run it through a software pipeline, you run through all the automated tests, and you want to make sure that it's ready to deploy into production, you have to be able to provision these environments. And so cloud really becomes a big enabler. If you have infrastructure as a service, you have private or public cloud, I can dynamically provision the environments, I can get it configured, I can deploy the application, I can run through my battery of regression tests, make sure that it's working, I can tear it down. And with cloud, I can much more readily spin up an environment that more closely mimics the production environment. So the whole issue of, hey, it worked in the development environment, doesn't work in the production environment, I think cloud breaks that bottleneck down. So the whole software-defined infrastructure, infrastructure as a service, the software-defined networking, this all is really a huge enabler because it does allow you to remove that bottleneck, provision on demand, tear it down on demand. And
I think, it's important to emphasize the fact that in order to do that effectively, you do need a lot of automation. So if you can spin up a cluster of, say, 100 machines, run it for an hour and tear it down, if it takes you 2 hours to spin up the cluster and you're doing 1 hour of testing, then you're going to fail. If it takes you 5 minutes, you're going to succeed. So I think that, the fact that in order to make the cloud work really well, you really want to leverage the fact that it's elastic and it's on demand means that you have to spend the time up front to make sure you can actually take advantage of that. You don't want a bunch of sysadmins sitting around manually configuring 100 machines for you so that you can then tear it down, an hour into your test. So I think that's, it kind of, the two go together because in order to get that kind of effectiveness out of the cloud, you've got to spend the time on the automation and the DevOps stuff.
Yeah, so we're just about out of time. So just as a final word, I would add, this is all quite correct, but I would add that if it weren't for what the public cloud gave us, if it weren't for Amazon showing that we could get the cloud to work, we wouldn't have the lesson that, yes, we can automate the operational environment at scale. And it's the lesson of the cloud that really gave us the idea that we could do DevOps at all. Well, thank you very much. We're out of time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I add one last thing?
Okay.
It didn't come up, but it would be a travesty if we didn't mention containers in relation to DevOps.
You don't want to go into containers.
Docker, Rocket, really ideal kind of vehicle for helping to enable DevOps.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a whole other talk, though. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.